Welcome, everyone, and good afternoon. My name is Tommy Messenger. I'm one of the founders of K-12 Impact, and we are super excited for you guys to be here today. Thanks for joining us for the future of K-12 EdTech, where funding, policy, and priorities are headed. A conversation designed to help EdTech leaders better understand the funding, policy, and political forces shaping district decision-making, and what that means for companies selling into K-12. I'm also joined here today by my co-host, Tom Davis. I will say you don't have to be a Tom, Tommy, or Thomas to host one of these webinars, but it does help your cause. And we're excited to be joined today by Kevin Gordon, the president of Capital Advisors Group. Kevin, thanks so much for being here today. How are you doing?
You bet. Or not? Hang on. It looks like I'm connected now. There we go.
Got it. Take it away.
Sorry, a little freeze there. Good, doing great. Good to be with you guys.
Awesome. Before we get started, just a couple housekeeping items. Thank you all, first of all, for joining live today. This session is being recorded, so there's going to be some great information shared today. So you're probably going to want to rewatch it. But if you have some colleagues you want to send this to, we're going to make the recording available on our YouTube channel, also inside our free community, which you can join. And we'll also share it out on LinkedIn, so make sure you follow me. So I'll share it out today as well. Also, today's session is interactive. So a huge part of this webinar is your questions. At the bottom of your screen, you'll see the Q&A icon. So you see the little icon at the bottom of your screen. So just drop your questions throughout this conversation. I'll kind of be monitoring those questions throughout the session. We want it to be interactive, and we'll try to get to as many questions as possible. All right, Tom, I'll hand off to you for the first question.
Thanks, Tommy. Hi, everybody. It's great to have Kevin on board. I've known Kevin for, 20, 25 years now. It's been a long time, and he's pretty well respected in the state in terms of what's happening, not only politically with the state budget and the May revise, but that's what I want to talk about. The first question I have for you, Kevin, is there's been a lot of talk about no money in California. We're struggling. People are telling our folks, don't take a meeting because basically we don't have any money. So if you could spend a little bit of time telling the folks on the call about the May revise, what that's all about, and then what the outcomes with that were, Kevin, and then where we're heading, would be great.
Yeah. No, absolutely. Thanks, Tom. Always great to be with you. You're just such a great and fun leader in the education community. Always appreciate an opportunity to collaborate. Yeah, you're absolutely right. Is a lot of, especially those of you that are on the call that are interacting with our CBOs, and we have some of those and superintendents as well with us today. You guys all know what we're talking about, which is that 2/3 of California school districts are cutting their budgets. And they're doing so probably in large measure to declining enrollment, but there are a lot of other things that are sort of plaguing the stability of school finance at the local level, including a lot of litigation that is, where there's zero culpability on the part of a district, but, we need tort reform so bad because of people that just make a career, cottage industries popping up around very specific kinds of issues that they're seeing an opportunity to litigate and then try to get settlements out of school districts. And those costs of not having the kind of reform we need with regard to people that are filing frivolous lawsuits is spiraling out of control. There's the sexual molestation and abuse cases that are generations old that at school district itself is having to cover costs when it's had zero cases. And it's because of the pooled insurance coverage they've had. So if somebody else had a case and liability for something, the whole pool shares the cost. So districts that have had totally clean record, no problems, are having huge cost implications here. There's a lot of focus on trying to deal with that issue. It's called AB 218 and controls on that legislation that uncapped the statute of limitations. So there's costs. There's one of the biggest rising costs for school districts in the area of utilities. So what's happened is you combine all of that with very, very sort of, I would just call it a downer of an economic forecast, not economic forecast, but a budget outlook starting last November by, in my view, extremely overly conservative outlook on what was going to happen with K-12 funding. And a lot of people heard me kind of jumping up and down saying, pay attention to the green money that's actually showing up. because the lag time between these prognosis and what was happening every month, which is billions of dollars more money was showing up in the state treasury than was budgeted for, that I could tell that people's conservatism, which is predicated on the nonpartisan legislative analyst having an ultra conservative viewpoint, FICMAT, which echoed that sentiment about extreme caution, and the fiscal sort of onslaught of challenges local districts have led everybody to just lock down. They were just like, we don't have any money. Let's start doing some cuts. Let's do a bunch of pink slips. And I was just like, a lot of it was ignoring, again, the money of which, when every dollar shows up under Proposition 98, our minimum funding guarantee for schools, we get 40% of that. So what has happened is, and I can get into this, is there is just dramatically more money. Kevin Gordon's been saying that for months, that wait till you see what happens in January with the governor's budget. His budget was $30 billion higher in total revenue projected than the legislative analyst. So there was that. And I said, by the way, the governor will prove to be low in his budget estimates. And that's what we're seeing now at the May revision, is his $30 billion was low. We've had another 25 billion of revenue over the 3-year period that we look at a budget in terms of the forecast, $25 billion difference over the governor's January budget. And that was said to be extreme, and it wasn't. So yeah, the things are going to change a lot, because as we do our budget workshops, there's going to be a broader consciousness across CBOs and superintendents about exactly what kind of revenues they're going to have to play with. And some will even say, well, until the budget's done, we really don't know what we have. I promise you that as good as this budget revision looks, it's actually going to get better. It will not under any circumstance get worse, because to make it worse means they're going to violate the Prop 98 guarantee and violate the Constitution even more than they already are. It's going to get better, not worse, by the time we get this budget done in 30 days.
Kevin, we appreciate that snapshot. That's super helpful. And like I said, if you have questions, please throw them in the little question icon at the bottom of your screen for Kevin here. So, Kevin, if I'm a K-12 company, I'm an EdTech company, and all I've been hearing is funding's drying up. Funding's drying up is a bad economic market. What are the funding sources that are available to me if I'm working with districts? Like, what are those specific funding sources in California, and maybe even at the federal level that I have access to?
Yeah. So, I mean, at the federal level, it's just the same sources that have always existed. And remember, at the federal level, it's all flat funding. So, and which is a good news, because the president was trying to get $12 billion in cuts to the budget that he got zero of. He didn't get the cuts. He's proposed somewhere close to $15 billion in cuts for the next year. And then when I say the next year, it's the year that starts a year from now. I mean, the way the fiscal years confuses a lot of people. The debate you're going to have over the budget right now is not going to be until the school year 2027, now in the fall of 2027. But the president's not going to get those cuts either. So, but what will happen is that we don't have a chance to debate increases. We're only going to be flat on federal funding. So Title I, Title II, Title III, Title IV, all the major funding for special ed, all of that stuff is going to basically be flat funded as long as this president's in office. So, until there's a change, really, and even if the House goes Democrat, we're not going to see a change in that. It'll just be a defense against cuts. So you got that dynamic going on. The state level, the pots of money to focus on, there's a couple, and they're big. One of them is the block grant that does delineate certain things around literacy and some priorities that the governor has, but I call them sort of the love letter of suggestions, because embedded in it is language that says, or anything else you want to spend it on. Most districts will be spending it on the or anything else. And that includes everybody that's on this call, that if you've got something that's in the compelling interest of a school district to actually procure, it's going to be with some of this block grant money. The block grant that the governor had proposed in January was about $500 a kid, $2.8 billion. He's added to his proposal upped the amount to a total of $5 billion.
Oh, wow.
So it's just crazy big money. And I don't think we're done. I think that may end up going up another billion or two by the time the budget finishes, because the governor is holding back some of our money. And there's a lot of controversy about this holdback. It's money that schools should have. He's borrowing against it to pay for things on the non-education side of the budget that they can't afford. The nonpartisan legislative analyst is saying, you're putting money on that credit card, governor, you're going to have to pay next year anyway. You might as well give the school people their money. And then the Senate and the Assembly both are absolutely opposed to the holdback. So if we get even part of the remaining holdback, which is roughly $4 billion, let's say we get another 2 billion, that's 2 billion on top of the 5 for one-time purposes. So lots and lots of one-time money. And then of course, districts can spend that over time. They can use it to build reserves. They can do whatever they want with it. Unless in the final version of the budget, they say, we're going to give you this block grant, but you have 2 years to spend it or 3 years to spend it or whatever. But in worst case scenario, it'll be a multi-year kind of chunk of money. And in the interest of people trying to sell stuff to district, you probably want districts to be under the gun to spend it. You know, if it's open-ended and you can use it to build your reserves, that's not probably good for anybody on this call. But if you want them to spend it, then you're going to like those restrictions. So there's that, the one-time money. And again, there's a lot of it. Then there's ongoing money that was increased beyond what any district has budgeted. And I'll tell you, most districts may have budgeted for the $500 a kid on the one time, but they definitely not budgeted at all for the difference between the 2.8 billion and the $5 billion, so almost $3 billion, a little bit higher than $3 billion of money, one-time money they have not budgeted for at all. And once we get a budget act on June 15th, then they're going to start to get a little bit more flexible about using some of that money for different kinds of purposes. But the ongoing money is the part that's interesting in here. The governor had always proposed to fully fund a cost of living adjustment at, I think it was originally 2.41%. Then we got a final number of 2.87%. And we knew that was going to be the COLA figure for the statutory legal obligation. And the governor decided, I'm going to add to that because we know that COLA is pathetic. It doesn't keep pace with inflation. Let's give districts a little more flexibility. Let's give them this COLA, and the COLA ends up being 4.31% is this added COLA amount. But then they stick in there a mandate that districts have not had before, and they say, and we're giving you that COLA money so you can use that to pay for it, which is a mandatory 14 weeks for pregnancy leave. And what comes with that, it's all going to depend on the type of district you have, the age of your employees. It's going to probably hit elementary schools harder than high school districts in terms of the age component. It is a requirement that extends even to our community college districts. Community college districts are completely unfazed because they just don't have a teaching force or a personnel force that are in those years when they're having babies. They're all older. So it's very disproportionate in effect. We are going to work really hard in the coming weeks to decouple that 14-week mandate from the money that's in the super COLA and tell the governor that with the money, the 3.9 billion he owes us, he ought to pay for that separately. And I think we might be successful. So we're going to push for that. But so there's one-time money, then in ELOP, the Expanded Learning Opportunity Program, and a lot of private sector companies are focused on that. It's roughly 4.3. It's probably almost $5 billion now. Ongoing permanent money that's in the budget. It'll be there every year. It's not going away with the new governor. That's here to stay. And the thing that's interesting about that program is we know that the original sort of what we call tier one focus of the program was to make sure kids in poverty had an opportunity to get ELOP services in the 30 days of summer session. What Tier 2 does is it says, once you've covered all of that, then we need you to basically to all kids. And in that second tier, there was a dollar amount basically that was determined on whatever the balance is of unused money from tier 1. And it fluctuated all over the place. The state would say, okay, this many people subscribe to tier one. Here's how much money was left over. Here's what you're going to get. Well, districts couldn't plan for that. So what the legislature is headed to do with the governor as well is to stabilize by saying tier two is going to get a guaranteed amount up front that you have. And what that's going to do is it's going to surge the number of districts that are doing broader ELOP services and summer session, because they're going to know in advance what kind of resources they have. They can budget and plan for it instead of sending the money back to the state. So those are some of the big pots. Then there's also a really big infusion of ongoing permanent money in special ed. And it's not necessarily to be used for special ed. Special ed encroachment by school districts, the general fund support in a school district for special ed is so huge that when the district gets $1 for special ed increase, it's like giving the district an extra $1 for general purposes. That amount of money is big. It equates to more than 2% of the overall, sort of on schedule, like if they were to pass that on to employees. It's a big increase in money, $2.4 billion total. It is 2.4 after the governor already proposed $500 million. So it's inclusive of that $500 million that he proposed in January. So, it nets out to be still a really nice increase in overall investment in special ed, $1.9 billion of additional money that districts are not budgeting for. And I guarantee you the legislature is not going to, they're not going to discard, I think, that investment. I think we're going to be getting that. So the combination of the super cola, the special ed investment, the block grant that's at $5 billion, some of these other things, $1 billion more for community schools. So if you've got a business or you've got products and services where you're appealing to that sensibility that cities, counties, community service districts, and school districts band together, and that the school districts share of doing things that serve the whole child, mental health, well-being, healthcare, any kinds of broad-based services that affect what we call the whole child. They're going to be getting an infusion of $1 billion into that program. The governor's not backed away from that. In fact, I think he's supplementing that a little bit in this budget as well. So we'll see what ends up happening with that. I think it's got broad support in the legislature. That's probably going to stick as well. So that's kind of a quick overview of some of the big pots of money.
No, I think the key takeaway there is there's money, there's funding.
Yeah.
It's just where you look. And if I'm a sales professional, if I'm a company looking to partner schools and districts in California, right, I should have a positive outlook because there's funding available. It just knowing how to navigate those sources. Is that correct?
Absolutely. And the more you understand about some of these little pots of money, the better it is in terms of your conversation with school officials, which is that they have been very deliberately and intentionally saying, look, we don't have a lot of resources and we're doing pink slips and we're in a budget cutting mode. Until, really this May revision hits and they realize there's a baseline of increased funding that's absolutely headed their way. And it's only going to get bigger by the time we finalize the budget on June 15th. You're going to see a behavior shift in school districts about, okay, we're going to have resources. A lot of it's going to be one-time money. What can we spend money on, even if it's multi-year licenses or that kind of thing? What can we spend money on that moves the needle for the district in terms of its core goals? And if you've got, a business that's focused on those essentials that a school district needs for instructional purposes, school safety, ELOP, whatever the case might be, the more you're conversant you are in some of these pots of money, the better off you'll be.
Oh, that's awesome. Kevin's dropping some good news here today. Kevin, if we can, I have a question I'm going to throw up on the screen here. But I'll read it off. So with federal funding and you kind of answered this question, but I think the second part we can address. So with federal funding uncertainties and shifting political priorities, what funding streams should EdTech companies be helping districts lean into right now? And are there any ones that are too risky to build a sales strategy around?
Yeah. When we know that an overwhelming amount of the money that districts are getting is one time, it just feeds into the idea of technology investments are a good thing. One of the things that we know, and the legislature is a little moody about screen time, and you're seeing that politically emerge. about screen time. So you think about ed technology, and by the way, if you're in the ed tech field, we got to do a concerted pushback on that, because what legislators are not understanding is that, the screen time that I think they're really concerned about, and they're conflating the two, is the scrolling on cell phones. Is the idea of a computer as an essential tool, like a textbook would have been, or paper and pencil, is getting lost here. Is that, in fact, testing assessment companies, some of which we represent, are really concerned, and we're helping articulate that. Is like, hold on a second, there ought to be big exemptions in the law on screen time limits, and certainly taking a test and exam when you've got to go online and do your tests ought to be exempted from the egg timer that says you've had too much time on screen. And there's a whole lot of other exemptions that are really important. What about the idea of sort of the power of a teacher in a classroom to lead the instructional practices that are happening there? Is, hey, I've got an assignment that I want kids to jump into, and we've got this really cool thing. Everybody open up your laptops and let's take a look. You're really inhibiting and intruding on, I think, the independence of a teacher. And I'm hoping our teacher union friends are going to get involved with this debate too. But all that being said, to kind of answer your question, is technology investments I equate to instructional materials. And instructional materials historically, and technology purchases, have always been advantaged when there's big pots of one-time money. You guys can be able to make investments. Now, when it comes to licensing and software and that kind of things, we have gotten good at doing multi-year licenses when a district's got a big old chunk of money it needs to spend, and working with districts on that kind of an approach. That's all good. One of the other areas that districts, that are thinking about, what is my neighbor doing? What do I need to be doing? What are my teachers and my students demanding? Is more and more folks are starting to do stuff with AI. And so that's emerging. We have a client that we work with, Magic School, and they're doing some really cool things in classrooms that, I'm telling you, there's a lot of mythology around what goes on in EdTech, and the biggest solution to breaking down the mythology of what threats there are, and there are real threats out there for our kids, but breaking down the good stuff that's happening by innovators, is getting policymakers and legislators to actually tour schools and see it with their own eyes. And they're blown away by what kids are doing. It's just amazing stuff. So we are on a campaign right now to get lawmakers into classrooms to see what innovation looks like in terms of technology. And we just need to be pushing the envelope. So I don't think, in terms of risk on investment and what you're doing as a company, there's clearly going to be some risk, and you can read the headlines where parents and communities have anxiety about technology and its effect on our kids. It's about privacy. It's about a lot of those kinds of things, really, more than anything. So what you want to be doing is looking at innovators that are investing in technology advancement, but yet that's safe. And you do that, I don't think you should be hesitating around your strategy and your sort of go-to-market strategy on those kinds of products and services.
That is super helpful. I'm going to answer this question real quick. There's a question about, is this being recorded? Yes, it's being recorded. So we'll post it to the free community. We're also going to share it out. I'll post it on LinkedIn. So if you don't follow me, you can follow me on LinkedIn to get access to that. And we'll share it out today. This kind of question is related to another question we have, but it's a quick one. But yeah, for someone new to EdTech, they're in a new sales role or client success role. What titles should they be looking to target of who approves these funds?
Yeah. One of the things I hear so often is that, oh my gosh, if we have to go through the technology director, we're going to be dead in the water. We got to talk to superintendents. We got to talk to boards. We got to talk to CBOs. All of that, I kind of hear you. At the end of the day, unless that person is, slipped on a banana peel or on their way out, the superintendent, the CBO, and everyone, they're going to look to that colleague on the cabinet that does technology to say, and if you've gone around them, that you're not doing yourself any favors. Yes, when you pay attention to CSBA's conference and you're in front of a school board member and you say, look at, what you don't want is the board member to go back to the district saying to the superintendent, you got to meet with these people. The first thing a superintendent is going to do is say, how do I prove that that school board member didn't know what the hell they were talking about? Is that they don't like being told what to do. But the degree to which you're at a CSB event, I always say no self-respecting superintendent lets their board go out unescorted. It's usually superintendents are close by. Is superintendents are good people to have a conversation with about the elevator pitch about what we do. But at the end of the day, you're going to want that tech leader in the district to know what you're up to. And, the other advice I always give is subject line matters, is that, you got to really think about the subject line and email communication that you get, because they're getting hit up by people all the time. And how you communicate on that subject line is going to make the difference between whether they open it and you pique their interest. So, just be careful of that. But, again, if you go straight to the superintendent, they're going to either not open it or they're going to send it to the tech leader anyway. So I would definitely be trying to make inroads there. Getting involved with the statewide association called CITE, CITE, which is the technology organization for all the CTOs in California, is a very, very worthwhile endeavor if you're in the technology space. Even if it's ed technology, eventually they're going to be involved with it. And when someone at the cabinet table, like the head of instruction, looks over at their assistant suit for technology and says, "Hey, have you heard of X?" And the technology director goes, "No." And he goes, "Oh, they're knocking on my door." Well, I've never heard of them. That doesn't help you. Is that it's good if technology leaders who want to think they know everybody and they know everything are savvy to what it is you're doing and they have a good impression. So.
No, that is very insightful. I mean, we talk a lot about that in our academies of multi-threading, what it looks like to map out who the decision makers are. And then to your point, tailoring the message to the priorities that they're focused on. The way you talk to a site level leaders, the way different than you talk to someone at the district level. So thanks for providing clarity there. We've got a lot of questions here. I'm going to put this one up here. Is what can the California new 2.4 SPED funds be used towards?
Yeah. So again, school districts are covering the vast majority of the costs for kids with disabilities. The federal government puts in, probably if it's 10%, we're lucky, of the overall costs. Almost all the costs for special ed are shouldered by districts. So when the state comes along and says, we're just going to make a contribution toward your special ed costs, they're not doing an appropriation, which is a good thing. They're not doing an appropriation that says, we're going to give you money for special ed and we expect this higher level of service. They're not. They're just giving districts money to shoulder their special ed obligation. That's why I say $1 into special ed is like giving them $1 to spend on anything they want. It's completely flexible money. So that $2.4 billion adds basically flexibility to the general fund at the school district. And it comes to the district in the form of special ed. So they'll take it and they'll spend it on special ed, and it loosens up the general fund support by an equal dollar amount. So it's basically going to end up translating into totally flexible money.
That is very helpful and very insightful. We have a couple questions related to Perkins V funding. So I'll put this up here. Where do you see it evolving over the next 1 to 3 years in supporting work-based learning models? Do you think districts will increasingly prioritize platforms that can track measurable student workforce outcomes and employer engagement?
So again, this is federal money, Perkins money. And again, one of the things the Trump administration is moving the boxes around at the federal level in their effort to dismantle the U.S. Department of Education, but the programs don't go away. And again, Perkins is the kind of program that is flat funded. We're not seeing any increases there. So we expect that to remain stable. If there was any program that had the potential of being expanded where they might actually give us more money, it might be programs like this, because it tends to align more with Republican priorities. Anything that's workforce related, career tech related, they generally supportive of. So we had a meeting, we put together a group of people that went over to see some of Trump's advisors at the White House that do education policy. And we sat down with them and said, look, we're not going to be here to criticize anything you're doing we don't like. There's plenty of arguments to be had, but we want to focus on the things that we might potentially all agree on. And CTE, workforce issues, Perkins, those were the kind of things, and special ed Those were the things that we knew that they were sympathetic to, but they're also cutting the budgets across all of federal government. So while they like this stuff, it's not something that's getting it augmented. Now, maybe as they sort of get to the point where they feel like they've done enough cutting and they sort of reprioritize, they could end up putting more money in here. But right now, I would plan, if I was relying on or I had a products or services or I'm a district concerned about Perkins, is number one, it's probably not going down. It's probably going to be at least flat funded over the next few years. And I think there's the potential that it could get a little bit of a bump. We'll see.
Okay. Yeah, we have another question here related to the Perkins funding. In terms of timeline, so is there a specific timeline of how long it takes from a school to request funding to when they actually have that funding available for purchase?
You know, I am not an expert on federal Perkins money, how it works in terms of drawing down the funding. But if I can think of somebody that I think might be able to help you on that, we can try to get you directed in the right direction.
Okay. Perfect. Yeah, we can share that out in the community once we have that information. Another question here is, what's changed the most in how district leaders evaluate and approve new technology purchases compared to 3 or 5 years ago, maybe during when there's all the ESSER funds and during the pandemic and whatnot?
Yeah. Well, one of the things that's a reality that they do get is that to the degree that we had just this major sea change in the attitude about technology in the classroom because of COVID, it dramatically accelerated districts obviously getting into one-to-one devices and all that kind of thing. But they also know, and it's sort of the cold shower is that reality about technology, which is that you better be replacing these devices every 3 to 5 years. And 5 years, that laptop is ancient and probably doesn't even work very well.
Yeah.
But if you're doing planning to replace equipment, people understand that that's a fundamental in terms of their infrastructure. And so it's not a hard sell anymore about that, is that people are over that line, which is that they see it as an essential tool for teaching and learning. So that's probably the biggest difference in terms of them understanding that the basics in ed technology. In terms of new innovation, it is about, once you got devices and you're invested in leveraging technology for learning, then the big question constantly is what are you hearing about the newest best thing, and what resources do you have to go after that so that your school district's not falling behind others in terms of innovation. So I think people are paying attention to that more than they ever used to. So I think that the opportunities out there from a technology standpoint are still huge. The other issues are, and I've sat on the AI task force for AXA. Almost every one of the statewide associations has done something on AI to look at practices. It's been mostly focused around safety and that kind of thing. But I know that in AXA's case, they've been focused on innovations at the district level. It's not just about in the classroom with teaching and learning, but it's also about operations and how we're communicating with our communities and our parents. And some really exciting stuff going on there. So I just see a lot of people energized about sort of what the next iterations are going to be with regard to how we enhance teaching and learning and the operation of our own districts using technology. So and then the blossoming of just that many more companies that are across the technology space. I get calls practically every week from a new company that's trying to leverage technology to do things for school districts that are really, really cool.
I love how you pointed out the shelf life of technology in the classroom, because when I was teaching, the way the Chromebook looked at the beginning of the year and the way it looked at the end of the year was drastically different and gone through the ringer.
Yeah.
Kind of
Hey,
shifting.
Tommy, can I ask a quick question real quick?
Go for it, Tommy.
Only because, Kevin, why would a district, in their right mind, why would a district ever give back ELOP funds or any kind of funding they get from the state?
Yeah.
What are the reasons why they would do that?
Yeah, it's 100% based on their inability to staff it. And so what you've had happen in that space are a whole lot of providers who do turnkey opportunities to come in and do that. And then that's an issue that has to be sorted out with our classified and certificated unions locally. There's conversations going on about, and most of them say, look, we're tired. We do not. Hang on a quick sec. Let's see. Sorry about that, you guys. I froze up a little bit. Anyways, so a lot of the unions are just saying, go again. Let's see. Sorry, guys.
No,
Sorry,
you're
guys. I'm losing a little connection there.
go for it.
Fortunately, it's flagging it for me when I get reconnected. So, but anyways, the bottom line is the staffing, and the other issue is that I talked about it earlier is that the uncertainty of some of the funding was giving districts pause. Now that districts realize it's here to stay, and they've gotten a chance to ramp up over time, I think you're going to see less of that. It's still going to happen in pockets, but one of the things I'm happy about is the legislature did not flip the funding model, because I thought they were going to be going to a place where they're going to say, look, instead of doing what they currently do, which is they send the money to you with the idea that you're going to do the program, and then when you don't do the program, you got to send the money back. The legislative analyst was saying, hey, how crazy is that? Let's do it like most grant programs, which is you tell us if you're ready to do the program. And if you're going to do the program, we'll send you the money. But we're not going to just send it to you and then you don't do it and then ask for you to send it back. That's a big bureaucracy. The reason why I like the current methodology where they send it to you, assuming you will do it, is that it creates a huge incentive. You don't want to be sending that money back. So it makes you think really long and hard about what you can do to implement that money in creative ways that are allowed. And I think it pushes people to try to do the program. Whereas if it's grant based and you don't have the people to do it, and you're not staring at a big bucket of money that you'd otherwise have to return, you just opt out and you continue to opt out. And that's not a good thing, I think.
That's insightful. Tom, anything else you want to follow up with that?
No, that's perfect. That was great. Thank you, Kevin.
We have another question here. So as taxpayers are, scrutinizing districts and the ROI, the district's decision making, spending, what structures are in place to ensure districts can use allocated funds for their intended purposes?
Yeah. Well, we have this little thing called a school board. And not only that, you have everyone. I mean, I think it's so underestimated how many people will scream and yell at the local level if there's dollars that are intended for a certain purpose that the district appropriately should be spending the money on. And if any of those monies that should be going on one thing are being spent on something inappropriate, the alarm bell gets rung. There are complaint processes in place for, districts to get ratted out on when they're using money incorrectly. The other issue is, you guys might not know this, that school districts uniquely, it's a boon for our accounting industry. School districts are required to do an outside independent audit every year. They pick an independent private sector audit firm. It's not an internal audit they control. They have no control over it. They pick the firm, they come in, they audit to standards that are put forth by the state. And the state oftentimes is playing a little gotcha. Hey, we have that new program. We had all kinds of rules with it. Let's make sure that in this year's audit, when they say they call out certain items that they want the audit firms to pay attention to, it's called the audit guide. And those audit firms have to use that audit guide when they do their audits. And so they're looking under the hood constantly at issues and the appropriate use of money. And districts get caught up in that occasionally, but most districts know what's coming and they make sure that they're abiding by the rules.
That's super helpful. Have those structures in place. We got one more question here. So if anyone else has questions, feel free to drop them in the Q&A. But this one here is about district offices. So what platforms, or really just funding, are designed to support the district office? Are there any funds earmarked to support those who are leading districts?
Yeah, no, actually, I mean, we don't really have that. It's general fund to the district, and there's a certain amount that obviously supports district operations, and every district in the state wants to try to keep that at a minimum. So it's kind of unfortunate. It's also the complaint I have about professional development is we spend probably less than we should as an education community on professional development generally. But when we do spend money, it's almost always on certificated and classified staff. It's not so much focused on administration. We spend way too little money on the professional development for our management teams. And I came out of IBM Corporation, and IBM believed in massive investment in professional development, in the training of our people. And I know you see that in the private sector. It's just insane what they spend on the training of their management. And we don't do that in public schools, and I think it's a problem. But again, it's always part of that pressure about what are we spending as a percentage of overall expenditures for public education on what other people would say the bureaucracy, right? So we're
Yeah.
always fighting that misnomer and not training people the way we ought to be training them.
Yeah, K-12 Impact, we are big believers of training, upskilling, and sharpening your tools, for navigating the complexities of the K-12 market. Um, last question, Kevin, I want to ask you is just, someone listening today or someone listening to recording, if they could just take away a couple things from your conversation, what should be the key takeaways? If they're,
Yeah.
what do you want them to take away?
Yeah. I mean, the biggest issue is there is going to be more revenue at the local level than districts are currently budgeting for, one time and ongoing. That is going to help create the opportunity for instilling a little bit more fiscal stability in districts, because again, as I said, most districts are cutting their budgets. So it's going to give some districts, I've talked to a couple of superintendents that reported about every day in the newspaper because their districts are so upside down. And I say, sorry, it is going to solve all your problems, but it's going to definitely help you. And then in other districts where their problems are a lot smaller, but they do have problems, it's going to serve to go a long way to address some of their fiscal imbalance issues. And again, an overwhelming amount of this money is one time. That does not solve fiscal stability issues or the demands of our employees. It's a 90% people operation. But there is going to be, when you do that kind of amounts of one-time money, there's going to be a lot of money for what I call deliverables, things that people are selling that school districts say, look, I have to do something about beefing up the safety and security systems I have in my schools. That's all private sector investment. I need to do something about what we're focused on relative to our instructional strategies with some adoptions, instructional materials adoptions coming up by the state to have the freshest, newest instructional materials. This is going to give me the ability to invest in what we haven't had in a long time, which are back-to-back adoptions. And we've got that happening right now, and instructional leaders know what I'm talking about. But a lot of those things are going to be answered by some of this money. And then frankly, some of the one-time money is going to be used to stave off some of the layoffs and the draconian cuts that districts were thinking they needed to make. Some people will be frustrated by that because it'll be a sort of aiding and abetting people that are kicking the can down the road instead of making the cuts they need to make. But if it softens the edge on that, I think that's fine. If it makes it a gentler slope instead of draconian cuts that are sort of a meat axe approach, you get to sort of make this a little longer landing, then that's a good thing too. So the bottom line is the fiscal stress on school districts is about to get some relief, and I'm excited about that.
Hey, Kevin, real quick, final question for me. Real quick.
Yeah.
The declining enrollment and the low birth rate's is not going to change. So that's not going to go away. So is there any discussion about legislation that you guys are talking about rethinking how we fund schools?
Yeah, it's a great question, because there's a lot of conversation about enrollment versus ADA funding. And the very issues, one of the things we like to point out is the very issues that you've talked about, declining enrollment, declining birth rates, those kind of things. The shift to enrollment-based education is only a very, very temporal solution to that problem. It actually manifests itself, the declining enrollment, declining birth rate, manifests itself under either formula. So until and unless we decide we're not going to fund related to the number of kids you have at all, we're not going to escape that problem. And we are never going to not fund schools based on the number of kids you have. The question is it an ADA system or enrollment based system? And I think for the time being, given the price tag of shifting to enrollment based funding, which is at least $6 billion cost item, and a whole lot of other political reasons, we are going to be seeing ADA funding in California for, for a while. I don't see that shifting soon. So good question. And we're just going to have to shoulder our way through this period of our history where we have declining enrollment and low birth rates. So we gotta provide extra funding incentives for people to have kids. So
Well, awesome. I want to thank you, Kevin, for such an insightful conversation today. And thank for everyone who joined as well. One of my biggest takeaways from this is there's still funding in K-12, and there's a lot of it. It's just where you look. But with that, the landscape is evolving quickly, right? So this is not the time for teams still in the K-12 to pull back on development. As we talked about, training is important. It's a time to sharpen the skills of your sales and client success teams so they can navigate this moment well and not miss the opportunity in front of them. So, Kevin, you really break down the funding landscape today. Companies, you guys know your product, you know your mission, but knowing how to navigate the K-12 landscape, communicate value to district leaders, and build lasting partnerships is where we see teams really struggle. And so at K-12 Impact, we help sales and client success teams and the leaders that lead them strengthen those skills through academies built specifically for the K-12 education market. If you want to learn more about our academies, our sales and client success academies, you can scan the QR code on the screen to book a call with our team and see if it might be a great fit for your organization. A couple more things I'll draw attention to, but before I do, Kevin, if someone wants to kind of connect with you or they want to follow you, can they find you on LinkedIn? What's the best way to do that?
yeah, really the best way is just direct mail to me,
Okay.
email. It's kevin@capitaladvisors.org. And capital is with an OL, like the Capitol building. And then advisors, plural, ADVISORS.org. So that's me.
Awesome. Well, thanks for that. And a couple more things is if you're not a part of our free community, join today. Webinars, resources, discussion boards. I put the link in the chat. You're actually in the community right now, so join it. And then take a second to, before you log off today, I would join RCP for the upcoming webinars. I mean, this was an amazing, Kevin, an amazing conversation. And we have a great lineup of speakers coming up, and a few more we'll be announcing soon. So, make sure you take the time to RCP today before you forget. You'll find everything in the events tab. And so thanks everyone for joining us and spending the afternoon with us. Adios.